I call Jim Allister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amongst all the finger pointing in this House, there are some immutable facts, and one of them is this: that in the spring of 2024, the evidential burden to bring a prosecution was met, because the CPS levelled a charge that the two individuals charged were guilty under the 1911 Act of having information capable of assisting an enemy. So the first point out of that is this: it wasn't a deficiency in the 1911 Act, which is the problem here, because it was capable of bringing the charge. The second point is this: to bring the charge, the evidential test had to be met. That is to say, there was a reasonable prospect of conviction, and it was in the public interest. Those are the tests for bringing a prosecution. So the unanswered question in all of this is what happened between the spring of 24 and September 25, when suddenly the same evidential test was not met. What was it that changed? It was met, or the charges could never have been brought, but then suddenly it wasn't met and the charges were dropped. It seems pretty clear from what has been said to a committee of this House that what changed was that the government backed off in its evidence as to what would establish whether or not China was an enemy. And indeed, they were assisted in the meantime by the Bulgarian case, where the Court of Appeal refined enemy to that of posing threat or threats, and indeed said it was a matter of common sense as to whether or not something or someone was an enemy. And there is no greater jury question to decide something whether or not it is common sense. So the prosecution looked easier after the Court of Appeal decision, not harder. And yet the prosecution was dropped. And that is yet to be explained to this House. And it seems to me it can only be explained by the government failing to come up to proof on the basis, and since they had come up to proof to bring the charge in the first place, they obviously retreated. And we can talk around this as much as we like, but that seems to me to be the immovable reality of this situation. And of course, there are issues here about the equivocation of government towards China, of course. But that's an equivocation which even is infecting devolution. You know, in Northern Ireland, we now have a co-sponsored conference coming up between the Chinese government and the Sinn Féin economy minister to talk about infrastructure and investment. I do say to this government, they need to take a long, hard look at how devolved institutions, particularly in Stormont, are playing footsie with the Chinese government.